Alright, everybody. It's me, Stacks, the real homeless guy here. Now, I promised to start telling my story to everybody, so I'm not doing it live because the Wi Fi where I'm at, it goes in and out and it's not gonna work right. So, I decided to just record this video. I cleared up a bunch of space on my phone, so I should be able to make at least a 20-minute, 30-minute video. I don't know exactly how long I'm going to make each one. We'll see how long it'll record for and figure it out then. So anyway, my story. My story starts June 19th, 1975. The day the cutest baby in the world was born. Anyway, I was born in Far Rockaway, Queens, New York, to a man and a woman who at the time were both cab drivers back in the 70s and 80s in New York, in the 70s. Pretty dangerous to be a cab driver back then in the city. And my father's family was German, and my mother's family, they're Jewish religion, so right away it was rough for them to be together from both of their families. You know, my dad's father, my grandfather, he was a pretty... I remember him. I remember he had a couple of Doberman pinchers that would always be at his side and be around us when I was there. And if you looked at the guy, you would think he was a pretty mean guy, but I've heard he wasn't that mean of a guy. And you know, so they were German. They not so much cared that my mother was Jewish, but my mother's family, they weren't very happy about the whole German thing. And you gotta remember, 1975 was probably, 30 years since D-Day. 30 years sounds like a long time, but when you live it, 30 years is not that long of a time for something like that to have just, you know, that was when D-Day started World War II for us, 1945. So, you know, the whole Holocaust thing and everything was going on before that. But anyhow, you know, people have a hard time letting things go. So anyway, so there was friction there for them. And I remember some of my earliest memories. I remember, you know, we lived in those high-rise buildings and the terraces, and I remember we were near JFK Airport. I remember watching the Concords come in and out with my grandparents. My grandmother would watch us a lot. My mother liked to go out and party all the time. My dad was always going out to bars trying to find her and bring her ass home. And my mother is one of 5 children. There's 4 girls and a boy. One of the boy and one of the girls are actually twins. And she was in New York, you know, back when heroin and everything was big, and she got onto that. And her brother actually helped her get off that, locked her in a room, wouldn't let her out for a few days, got her off the heroin. But down the road, he ended up being a drug dealer for her, which is really kind of fucked up, you know, taking money from your sister and seeing her kid without things, and, you know, and seeing the kind of life that you're pushing her towards living. But I would never sell my sister drugs. So anyway, my mom and dad ended up splitting up. My dad was actually cheating on her. You know, I'm sure my mother wasn't being very faithful too, but who knows? You only hear one side of the story. My dad actually is still with the woman to this day that he ended up cheating on my mother with. And they have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And my mom met my stepdad. He was really cool. He was an alcoholic. Cared enough about us, though, that he went to rehab and got sober. Now, fast forward, we're back in New York in the 80s, you know. That's when crack first came on the scene, and I already had a mother who was a drug addict. So you can only imagine the things that I went through as a kid. If you could think it, I went through it. I remember being in the car. I remember them ripping off drug dealers. I remember the car being shot at. I remember a lot of things. A lot of things. So, I'm pretty sure nobody knew anything about PTSD back then, but I'm pretty sure a lot of some of my issues that I probably had throughout life had something to do with that kind of stuff. But that wasn't the only thing that we went through as kids. You know, when you're children of drug addicts, you tend to go through a lot of really crazy shit. So, we're living in a 4-family home. There's like 2 apartments upstairs, 1 on each side, 2 on the bottom, 1 on each side. People that moved in below us were bikers and drug dealers. And it turned out that my stepdad ended up owing them some money, didn't pay them or whatever. We come home one night and our doors kicked in and our house is ransacked. And we actually ended up going around the corner staying at a friend of ours that we went to school with, this black family. We stayed there for a little bit. My parents had gotten into a car accident and they were waiting on a check to come in. And I didn't know at first, but they were planning we were gonna leave New York haul ass. Now the reason for that wasn't just the drug dealers. My mom's uncle owned a window washing business, and he gave her some routes to help her out because they were real close, his niece. And she back then was bouncing checks to all these businesses. And if anybody else knows anything else about New York back in the 80s and all that, the mafia owned a lot of these businesses that my mother was bouncing checks at. And when we left New York, I found out years later that my uncle actually ended up paying a lot of money to the mafia because they knew exactly where we were going, and they told him that if they didn't get their money, they were going to kill all 4 of us. And I'm pretty sure they meant it. So he ended up paying them off with a whole lot of interest, I'm sure, to save our lives. And my uncle was a great guy, my grandmother's brother. God rest his soul. Great guy. I remember nothing but good memories and times with that guy. So I guess they finally get the check, and before we were gonna leave, we were back at the apartment trying to get some of our belongings, and I remember hearing something going on outside, and me and my brother look out the window, and out front my stepdad's getting the shit beat out of him by these bikers with these spike rings on, and he's getting beaten to a fucking bloody pulp. And I remember me and my brother, I was older, so I was always protecting my little brother. I always ended up having to be the one who didn't get to be scared and cry and all that, because I had to put on the, I had to show my brother that it wasn't that bad, or else he was freaking out crying. So I tried to make it to where he wasn't so scared all the time. And I remember being afraid if they were going to come upstairs and do something to me and my brother. But anyway, they beat him until he was unconscious, and then we ended up running out of the house and leaving. And in the middle of the night, one night, we throw the dog in the car with all her stuff, and it's a little tiny Ford Fairmont station wagon, no room in the back because they got a 5-piece wooden ladder set back there. And we got a U-Haul trailer with not much stuff in it. And here we take off to Florida. My grandparents moved to Florida, so right away my mom, the baby of the family, she's running after her parents. So the whole way down Florida, we're stopping in every freaking ghetto in every state because they're smoking crack the whole way down to Florida. And man, let me tell you, I remember being around some really, really strange people and being in some really scary places and not knowing where the hell my parents were, and me and my brother just sitting like in a room somewhere, and all these weird people, and I had no idea where we're at. Just some crack house out in the middle of nowhere in some state. Every state we went in, man, it was just crazy. The trip to Florida was unbelievable. And we get to Florida, and we're right around the corner from where my grandparents live, and my mom told us that we can't have the dog there, that they're going to try to find somebody to take the dog. And I'm upset already about that. And they come back to the car and they said they found somebody that's going to take the dog. And all these years I believed them, and I just found out recently, like maybe within the past year. And I remember when we left that gas station, I remember hearing the dog screaming and crying. And I remember being really sad. And well, it turns out that they didn't find anybody to get the dog. They put him in the bathroom and took off. And I didn't know that all these years. And I was not happy to find that out. Still not happy about that. When we lived in New York, we got a puppy one time, and my stepdad let it get out, and it ended up getting hit by a car. And I remember him running in the house with it, crying, and the thing bleeding in the head. And that's all I kept thinking about after I found out that dog was locked in that bathroom, that somebody opened up that door and that dog ran out. Who knows? You know? I mean, I think about, what that animal was thinking. Like, what did I do? Why are these people leaving me here? I don't know. I'm a nice guy. I believe animals have feelings, they feel sad, some people think like, animals don't feel sad or abandonment and all that kind of stuff, but that's bullshit. They feel it. They know. I don't care what anybody says. And all I thought about once I found the truth out about that was what that poor dog was probably thinking. He was a good dog, too. So, and I probably, and it makes me mad because they made me part of that without my knowledge, and it makes me mad to think that that animal was thinking, why would these people do this to me, and I was included in that, because I would never do nothing like that. Not even to this day. I don't give a damn. I know animals have feelings, and you take on the responsibility of taking care of an animal, and you gain that animal's trust, and then you just fucking abandon it like that. That's not cool. So anyway, we get to my grandparents' house, and things were alright at first, and then we end up getting this little trailer in a trailer park, and it's one of them little trailers that you gotta go outside to turn around to get to, something behind you. Like, it was small. 4 of us in there. So, hey kitty, one of my kitties came home. Kitty, say hi, kitty. Anyway, so now we're living in this little tiny trailer. My parents are continuing to smoke crack. Now my things are starting to disappear. When we're in New York, my 10th birthday, I got a 10-speed Ross bicycle. Was one of my favorite presents at that time. That disappeared. I got a detachable speaker boombox when I was a kid, dual tape deck. Now I'm from New York, so back in the 80s with Run DMC and all that, having a boombox was a big thing, Another one of my favorite gifts that I had, that disappeared. A lot of our stuff's starting to disappear. And we're getting told all different stories about where shit's at, this, that, whatever. Things are starting to get real bad. One night, my parents don't come home. Half the day, the next day, they're still not there. I call my grandparents. They come over there. My grandfather comes, gets us, leaves a note and a quarter on the table for my mother to call them when they get home. And she did. They were out all night getting high all day. Left us home, never even came back to the house. And that happened a lot. And like I said, it sucked because I really never got to be a kid, man. I always had to take care of my brother. Which I didn't mind. I mean, I love my brother. Of course, I didn't want to let him know that anything was ever wrong, Now, go back to being in New York. Before we left, before things got bad, I remember me and my brother used to play wrestling all the time and all that, and I was probably about 8 maybe. He's like 6, 7, and maybe I was 9. Well, roller derby was a big thing back then too, so we used to take pledge and spray the wooden floor with it and then slide around on our socks. Well, we were upstairs one day wrestling, and he did something that hurt me or something, and I remember looking at him and him seeing that I was about to beat the crap out of him, and he goes running downstairs, and I chase after him, and when we got in the living room, I kicked his feet from underneath him. He did a head dive right down to the corner of the wall in the door, or the floor in the door, and then he's crying that he can't move his head, move his neck. And every time he would cry, I would always look out the window and go, "Oh shit, Mom's home, stop crying." And he would stop because he thought he was going to get in trouble too, so that's how I used to get him to stop crying. So I did that. Now I got him on the couch. He can't move his neck, and I'm giving him food. He's got crumbs all over. My mother comes home, and she's looking at him going, "What the fuck's wrong with your brother?" I said, "I don't know. He fell down. He can't move his neck." So they end up taking him to the hospital. Well, I almost turned my brother at 7 years old or 6 years old into a quadriplegic. I kicked his teeth around and he moved 3 vertebrae in his neck. If I would not have put him on that couch and not let him move, if he would have moved, that vertebrae would have snapped. He would have been quadriplegic from the neck down his whole life, from 6 or 7 years old. That day I made a promise to myself that I would never put my hands on my brother again, and I never did. I never touched my brother ever again. We ever got in arguments, or if he wanted to fight, I would hold him down. Sometimes I would cry and tell him to stop, and beg him to stop, because if he hit me, I always had this switch in me. If somebody would hit me and if it hurt enough, I would kind of black out, and it actually was one of my fighting techniques when I was younger, because I would look at people and tell them to hit me. If they wanted to fight, I would look at them and go, "Hit me." It would do 2 things. One, it would fuck them up mentally, because now they're thinking, "Why does this little guy want me to hit him? What the fuck's he gonna do?" And 2, when they would do that, it would give me the ability to fight pretty good. And most of the time I did win because of that. I could never start a fight. I never could initiate a fight. If I tried, I would lose. But somebody would hit me hard enough, and if they didn't hit me hard enough, I would tell them to do it again. And they would do it, and it would turn out to be their downfall. But anyway, so I always, I would never touch him. We'd fight, and I would hold him down. I would never put my hands on him ever again. To the point that sometimes, like I said, he'd have me in tears, because I knew if he hit me and it was enough to a certain point that something bad was going to happen. So anyhow, we're in Florida now, and they didn't come home a lot. And then we ended up moving to Pompano Beach, and down there things got worse. Now we have no adult supervision, really. We're getting into trouble. We're doing just all kinds of shit. School is like, grades are just horrible. My mom is working at a bank at the time, and my stepdad's spending money that we shouldn't be spending. And the story I got was that my mother was taking money from her drawer to pay the rent and stuff, but who knows? They probably were spending it. She called out of work one day. Well, if you work at a bank and you don't come to work, guess what? They count your drawer. They found out she had money missing. And that's a federal crime. You're pretty much robbing a bank. So she had to go to a halfway house, and she got probation. She got lucky. And so that me and my brother wouldn't end up in the system, my grandmother talked to one of my mom's sisters in Georgia, who my uncle's was a doctor, he's retired now, but they're pretty wealthy, and they're probably the only ones who had the financial ability to take on a couple of little kids. At the time, 1988, they had a daughter off to college and a son about to graduate high school. Now they had these 12 and a 10-year-old coming. And they were great, man. It was great. We lived there for about a year and a half. Well, if anybody knows anything about the Jewish religion, when the guy turns 13, you got to have a bar mitzvah. Well, I had never knew anything about the whole religion. We never went to temple. We never spoke any Hebrew or nothing like that. Well, now I got these really religious aunt and uncle that I'm living with. I'm about to be 13. Well, I have to learn Hebrew in about 4 months. And I have to go to a temple and stand in front of everybody, all these people, and read out of the Torah and everything, and have my bar mitzvah. That was insane. But I did it. I learned how to speak Hebrew in 4 months, man. It was not easy, let me tell you, because I'm coming from a family who there's no supervision. Like, now I have to listen to people tell me what to do, and I have to be a good boy. What? It was like, it was rough, man. It was rough. I remember being on an airplane leaving Florida to go to Georgia, And I got my little brother next to me. We'd never been on a plane before. It's our first time being on a plane. He's scared to death of that. And he's crying because we're leaving my mom. And I was upset and worried, but, you know, I kept telling him that things were going to be okay, you know, and I couldn't cry, you know, I had to let him know, see that everything was alright. And we were there for about a year and a half, and I wish we would have stayed there. If my mother would have told me we were staying there, I probably would have been mad at her back then, but after the years of, once I would have graduated college, which I know I would have if we stayed there, and I would have had a whole different life, I would have looked at my mom and thanked her for leaving us there and thinking about us and not being selfish and bringing us home, because when we did come back to Florida, guess what? Nothing changed. And it went right back to the same old shit. So for about a year and a half, I got to be a kid. Never had to worry about if we were going to eat or what was going to happen, if something was going to happen to my brother because some weirdo was hanging out in the house. Like, it was normal. It was great. And we came back to Florida and everything was fucked up again, and everything just went right back to what it was. And yeah, my mom, when she went to that halfway house and all that, she got away from my stepdad. So we came back to Florida. No. We came back to Florida. He was still there. She was, but they were about ready to split up. We ended up going to live with my grandparents a little while after that, and with my mom, and then my stepdad was out of the picture for good at that point. And it was sad because, you know what, he really loved us, man. And once he quit drinking, my mother kind of got him back on drugs, telling, you know, one of those, you know, if you love me, you'll do it shit. And he did it, and unfortunately, you know, she sent him right back off the edge again with that dumb shit. You know, because when he was sober, and he loved us enough to get sober, man, he went to a rehab and quit drinking. And he was a great guy, man. He really was. When he was sober, he was a great guy. I remember when we left New York, I remember my mom took us to our dad to say goodbye, and I remember my dad looking at me. I'm 9 years old, and he goes, "Are you sure this is what you want?" I don't know what the fuck I want. I'm 9 years old, and I thought I was supposed to go with her. I thought I had to. You know, and I remember telling him yes. And what really sucks is that he's a great father to the daughter and son that he has with that other lady, but he never wanted nothing to do with me and my brother. And I always felt like he had a resentment towards me for telling him that I wanted to leave and go with my mom, you know, because I thought I had to. I didn't know. I wish he would have said, you know, you don't have to go. You know, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go. You know, or what's going on at home. I wish he would have asked questions. I know if I would have stayed with my dad, things would have been different for me too, you know. Like I said, he wasn't a bad guy. He was a great father so I just think he held a resentment towards me, which is really fucked up anyway, because I'm only 9 years old, you know. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. But, yeah, so. Anyway, so then my mom leaves, you know, gets rid of my stepdad, and we're living at my grandparents' house now for a little while. Then she finds these other friends, and we start going down there to hang out, and she meets this other guy. He's like in his 20s, just got out of prison. He's working at Taco Bell with one of the friends of hers. He's a freaking alcoholic, but she starts seeing this guy. He ends up being the father of my sister. You know, they had a kid together. And at this point, I'm almost 16 years old. No, I am 16, almost 17. We're not doing good. This guy's a fucking bum, a drunk. She's the only one working, you know. And I don't know, my mother just never had any luck with guys. And I remember I ended up leaving, going to Job Corps. I went to Job Corps in Waldorf, Florida for a year. You have 2 years to complete the program. I did it in a year. I learned auto mechanics, and I got my GED because high school or school wasn't for me. In 9th grade, I failed 9th grade, did it again, I passed. Halfway through 10th, I dropped out. School wasn't for me anymore. I was done. And so I left the house, I left home, and I went to Job Corps for a year, and that was pretty rough. If anybody knows anything about the whole Job Corps program, back then in the early 90s, it was a pretty fucked up place. They had freaking criminals there with kids. It was just unbelievable the shit that went on at that center. And it was like that at all the centers all over the country. It was just unreal, man. I did a lot of growing up real quick in that place. But yeah, so then my Job Corps, I finished that program and I come home. And this is where I'm going to stop my story. Then I'll start. The next part would be, now I'm home and I got to start being an adult and start getting a job and working and all that. So that's where I'll start off the next video. So, alright guys, I hope you enjoy this part of my story, and I will continue on with my story tomorrow. I'll do another, been 26 minutes, so I guess that's enough. Alright, guys, have a good night. Thanks for supporting my channel, man. I love all my fans, man. Believe that. I couldn't be doing any of this if it wasn't for you guys. Have a good night, everybody. God bless.